Hello and welcome to another TLDR UK video. Yesterday afternoon, it was announced that for parts of the UK, Christmas had effectively been cancelled. For those of you who don't know, the UK government announced earlier this month that all travel restrictions will be dropped over the Christmas period, allowing up to 3 households to form a Christmas bubble, permitting them to meet indoors for 5 days to celebrate the holiday. However, due to changes in the virus's transmission, the government announced yesterday that these allowances for Christmas had to be limited in some areas and all out scrapped in others. So in this video, we're going to examine those changes a little bit, but we're mainly going to discuss the more interesting part of this story, why it's happening so late, why the government says they couldn't announce any of these changes sooner, while others like Labour's Sir Keir Starmer have been calling for this for weeks. Before we start, more than half of you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, so as a Christmas treat to us, hit subscribe. Also, with Brexit announcements around the corner and more COVID developments expected, subscribing and ringing the bell will let us guide you through this turbulent time. I know some of you will be keen to jump forward and start discussing what's happening over the Christmas period, but we think it's important to start by rewinding and seeing what's led us up to this point. As you'll learn from the government announcement in a moment, the changes that are being introduced are being blamed on a new strain of COVID-19. This new mutation appears to have 23 changes from the original, more common COVID-19 virus, more than standard mutations. These changes primarily manifest themselves in the transmissibility of the virus. Essentially, it's able to spread significantly faster than the more common COVID-19 virus. Other than that, at least based on current information, the mutation appears similar to the original. The symptoms are the same, the mortality rate is the same, the treatments continue to work against it, and the vaccine is still expected to defeat it. The real issue here is just the transmissibility, with Johnson saying in yesterday's press conference that this mutation could increase the R rate by 0.4, which is a significant jump. The mutation was first really identified during the autumn, with its importance becoming obvious in the aftermath of the November lockdown. The mutated virus was most prevalent in the southeast, London and east of England, so it's not surprising that despite lockdown and tiering measures, places like Kent were continuing to see the virus's transmission go up. While other areas saw dropping cases, this just didn't happen to the same extent in the south, largely because of this faster spreading virus. So when the government lifted the lockdown at the beginning of December, the mutated virus was able to spread, and spread it did. When you look at the data provided by the government yesterday, you can see quite how quickly cases got out of control in these areas of England. It certainly seems that this is down to the new mutation of the virus when you dig deeper. When you look at the percentage of cases that were this new strain in November, it only attributed for less than 30% of cases. As of this week though, it's jumped significantly, leading the government's advisors to comment that this has become the dominant strain of the virus in these areas, beating out other mutations and spreading faster than before. As I say though, while this was happening in November and December, it wasn't entirely clear what was going on. Hence the government happily announcing that for 5 days over Christmas, travel restrictions will be lifted and people could meet their families indoors, apparently unaware of the impact of the new strain of the virus. As information emerged though on this new, more transmissible version of the coronavirus, the decision looked more and more questionable. Towards the beginning of the week, Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, told the House of Commons more information about the new mutation of the virus.
We have identified a new variant of coronavirus, which may be associated with the faster spread in the southeast of England. Initial analysis suggests that this variant is growing faster than the existing variants. We've currently identified over 1,000 cases with this variant, predominantly in the south of England, although cases have been identified in nearly 60 different local authority areas, and numbers are increasing rapidly.
At this point, no official changes had been made to the Christmas plans, but it was clear that things were deteriorating. Then on Wednesday, the issue arose once again in the House of Commons during Prime Minister's questions, when Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer, raised the issue with Johnson.
The problem is the Prime Minister makes the same mistakes over and over again. And it's now likely that the next big mistake will be over the easing of restrictions over Christmas. Let me give you the British Medical Journal. We believe the government is about to blunder into another major error that will cost many lives. The Prime Minister should listen to that advice, not just ignore it as usual.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I wish he'd have the guts just to say what he really wants to do, which is to cancel the plans people have made and cancel Christmas. I think that's what he's driving at, Mr. Speaker.
We discussed this exchange further in our series This Week in Parliament, which you can find on the TLDR Daily YouTube channel. It's linked down below. Anyway though, Johnson seemingly blamed Starmer for wanting to cancel Christmas and encouraged him to.
And I think what people would like to hear in this season of goodwill to all men is a little bit of support from the right honourable gentleman for what the government is trying to do to beat coronavirus, and perhaps just a little less carping.
So while things were looking more worrying, no change was made here either. Later that same day, the government held a press conference to announce changes to England's tiering system, where a handful of areas moved tiers. At this point, Christmas was raised once again, with some questioning whether a 5-day break to restrictions was really a good idea. The government did offer new advice, encouraging people to be more careful, but again, no changes were made at this point, with Johnson himself remarking that changing Christmas rules would be inhuman.
While it would not be right, we think, to criminalise people who have made plans and simply want to spend time with their loved ones, we're collectively asking you to think hard and in detail about the days ahead.
Although it is worth noting that Wales and Scotland did make changes to Christmas rules at a devolved level. Even up until yesterday, the government and Johnson specifically continued to insist that the efforts being made already were enough, and no further changes would be necessary. So again, no changes to Christmas were made. That official government line started to look a bit more shaky at the beginning of the weekend, with major cabinet and scientific meetings being held on Friday night and Saturday morning. Then a government press conference was announced for mid-afternoon on Saturday, when the bomb finally hit.
Yesterday afternoon, I was briefed on the latest data that shows the virus spreading more rapidly in London, the southeast and the east of England than would be expected, given the tough restrictions that are already in place. It seems that the spread is now being driven by the new variant of the virus, which we spoke about earlier this week. And although there's considerable uncertainty, it may be up to 70% more transmissible. Cabinet met at lunchtime to agree the following actions. First, we will introduce new restrictions in the most affected areas. These areas will enter a new Tier 4, which will be broadly equivalent to the national restrictions which were in place in England in November.
Let's tackle this element first. From today, some areas of England are entering Tier 4, a brand new tier for England, which further restricts what people are able to do. I say it's a new tier for England because it was actually introduced by Scotland a month or so ago, so I guess shout out to Sturgeon and Scotland for that one. Anyway, these changes impact everyone in Tier 4 areas from today up until they're moved out of Tier 4 at some point in the future. The real bombshell was how this could impact those in Tier 4 and the rest of the country over Christmas.
We must, I'm afraid, look again at Christmas. And given the early evidence we have on this new variant of the virus, the potential risk it poses, it is with a very heavy heart, I must tell you, we cannot continue with Christmas as planned.
It seems that finally the government has been forced to change the Christmas plans, with new restrictions in place for those in tiers 1 to 3, reducing the length of Christmas allowances and limiting their scope, and for those in tier 4, completely scrapping Christmas changes altogether. As we emphasised earlier in this video, it all came down to the virus's spread and the new mutation. Essentially, the biggest concern is that when people travelled for Christmas and then met indoors for 5 days with other households, the conditions were perfect for the virus to spread around the country. At the moment, it seems as though the new strain of COVID is wreaking havoc in certain areas, but the concern is that if Christmas goes ahead, that mutation will be allowed to cross the whole country. It's certainly a sad decision for everyone, especially those in Tier 4 areas, myself included. But looking at the whole timeline, the bigger question is why this realisation didn't come sooner. Cancelling Christmas for people was always going to be difficult, but it's tougher still when they've been promised a break from regulations over Christmas, only to have them ripped away mere days before the plan was supposed to come into effect. With the warning signs starting to emerge in November, and with people outside the government questioning the idea of Christmas breaks for a while now, it's hard to justify leaving it quite this late, and explain why so many times this week the government seemed to deny that this was even a possibility. The government argues that its decision was based on information that emerged in recent days, new data that shows how the mutated virus took over from all other versions in the south of England, and the speed of transmission in these areas. But this could, and maybe should have been foreseen. Christmas is certainly an important time of year for many, and the mental health toll placed on those lonely and isolated over Christmas will be tremendous. But given the pace of the virus's spread, and the fact that we're headed into January, normally the NHS's toughest month anyway, it's hard to justify a break from COVID restrictions. And one last thing, because I already hear people saying this in the comments. Good luck getting people to follow the rules, I've not been following them all year. Well, I'm sorry to be so blunt, and I know we try and be apolitical here, but my friend, you are the problem. Like or loathe the government's strategy, but people breaking the rules constantly and seeing people without good reason are objectively, scientifically spreading the virus. You're the reason that we're seeing cases rise. You're the reason why some people can't see their families this Christmas. You're not cool because you're breaking the rules, you're just selfish. What do you think though? Is it the right call to cancel or limit Christmas? Should the government have seen this coming sooner and made a decision earlier? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, while you're looking below the video, there's also more information there about the changes being made in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, because I know we've been pretty England focused in this video. Near that information, you'll also find the subscribe button, which if you hit, not only makes me smile, but also ensures that we keep you up to date on stuff like this going forward. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.